Hello everyone. I want to welcome you on this webinar tonight. Thank you very much, Sabine, for this nice introduction. It's really a pleasure for me to do this tonight because this is the first feline webinar we're going to do this year. And I hope you will have lots of questions because this is, I think, a very interesting topic because we're going to touch on colostrum, kittens immunity. To tell you the truth, this morning I was very happy because I thought that, wow, that's great. I'm going to speak to passionate people about a topic that is really important in the management of their cattery. And this is a talk we did at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of March in Miami at the World Cat Conference. We got a great feedback following this talk, so I thought it would be great to share it with as many people as possible. And I'm happy that you guys are here tonight to discuss this very interesting topic. And why it's very interesting is maybe I'm sure you're aware that in veterinary medicine, feline neonatology is kind of a gray area of veterinary medicine, especially the feline neonatology, because we don't have many data and there are still lots of things to discover. And in my actual position, I'm in charge of the technical services for our Pro Pillar here in Canada for Royal Canin. So I'm mainly dealing with canine and feline professionals, and basically I'm working very often with your veterinarians in order to try to help them to solve the issues you guys are facing, because you know that when you breed cats, unfortunately you're predisposed to see specific issues related to feline collectivities like upper rest diseases, diarrhea in kittens, dermatological symptoms sometimes, and one of the questions we get quite often concern, in fact, the neonates, the newborn kittens. When I speak about neonatology, usually we refer to the period from birth to 2-3 weeks of age, and during this period, you know that kittens are really fragile, and it's very important to do the best you can in order to optimize their health. And sometimes the question we get from time to time is, you have those kittens, their mom just gave birth to them, but unfortunately the mom has no milk. And that could be a critical situation, because in these kind of cases, you can wonder what to expect, what to do, and these typically are the question we get. Okay, what do we do now? Oh, for sure, we would need to replace the mother if she has no milk. But what are the best alternatives? What are the solutions we should turn to? What are the things we should focus on? And these are definitely some critical points that we're going to touch on tonight. The other thing is, what can we expect? Tonight I'm going to show you that the newborn kitten is for sure fragile. And if they don't receive the milk of the mother, if the mother has no milk, for sure, there are eventually some problems that can come from this situation. And we're going to see what you guys can expect when this happens and what you guys need to do in order, again, to optimize the neonatal survival rate of these kittens. And in order to answer this question, because it's going to be a very practical talk, we're going to try to make it as practical as possible. The goal of this presentation is really, again, to give you the tools and to tell you what you guys can do at your level, in your cattery, before, after, when you face this kind of situation, what you need to do in order to promote the health and to optimize the survival of these kittens. For that, we're going to focus on 3 different things. First, we're going to touch about the colostrum, this first milk of the mother, which in fact plays a huge and critical role in the health of these newborn kittens. We're going to speak about optimization and prevention. How do we optimize the quality of this colostrum? How do we prevent the issues that can come when we don't have access to colostrum? And we will also touch on a very specific situation, which is definitely not uncommon in feline breeding today, neonatal erythrolysis. So this is the plan we're going to have tonight during this presentation, and this is what the different points we're going to discuss in order to see what you can do in your catteries to optimize the health of your animals. One important point, if you have any questions during the talk, again, feel free to send them in, to write them down in the chat. We will flag all those questions, and at the end we will answer to some of them. If we cannot answer to all of them, whatever happens, we will answer them on the forum of our website, and we will share the link on Facebook, etc. So don't hesitate to send your question. The more the merrier, as usual. Okay, so now let's speak a little bit about the colostrum. And if you remember, the title of this presentation is Colostrums and Kittens Immunity, because I'm sure you're aware that colostrum plays a critical role in the first immune system of the newborn. But let's go back to the immune system first. You know that the immune system in an individual is all the things we have to fight the infectious disease, the pathogens that can potentially affect our health. And this immune system is generally composed by different components. First one is definitely we have some organs that are able to produce immune cells. These two organs in the animal body and even in the human body are usually the thymus and the bone marrow. The thymus and the bone marrow are able to produce competent immune cells that will be able to protect the individual. However, in the newborn kittens, those organs are not fully capable. They are not able to produce properly those immune cells that are supposed to defend the newborn. Typically, the thymus will produce T lymphocytes, while the bone marrow produces B lymphocytes. But in newborn kittens, at birth, they are not capable of doing that. And that explains you why, again, these animals are very sensitive to any kinds of pathogen. As I said, we need those immune cells, those B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes to fight the pathogens, because typically those cells, they are an important part, they play a huge role in building the immune response, especially the B lymphocytes, which are able to secrete and to produce antibodies. Let's see antibodies as guardians of the organism, which they are proteins that are able to inactivate and destroy the pathogens. And again, those immune cells, those lymphocytes in the newborn kitten, they are not able to respond to any immune stimulation from any pathogen. They are not yet able to build this immune response. So again, that explains you why the kitten at birth, they have some of these immune cells, but they are not, again, able to respond to any antigenic. And we touch a little bit on these antibodies. So as you can see, in this kind of situation, we have an individual, a newborn, which is not able to produce immune cells, which is not able, the few immune cells they have are not able to build an immune response. So where do they get their immunity from? Where do they get those antibodies? So the first thing we would think of at birth, just after birth, if they have some antibodies, this could come from absorption through the uterus of the mother during pregnancy. So we're going to focus on that because this is a very important thing when it comes to immunity in the newborn kittens. And in fact, for that, we need to focus on the different types of placenta we find in the different mammalian species. So here you have a picture describing you the different kind of placentas we find in the different mammalian species. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to see a placenta from a bovine or a placenta from an equine, or even a placenta from a human being. But these placentas are totally different from the placentas we find in dogs and cats. And one important thing to remember about the placenta, if we want the immune cells, the antibodies, to go from the blood of the mother to the newborn, they need to cross several layers. They need to be able there shouldn't be too many layers that separate the blood flow of the mother and the blood flow of the offspring during pregnancy. And if you look at what we have in horses and pigs or in sheep and goats, you can see that here we have the blood flow of their mother, and here the blood flow of the offspring. There are lots of layers that the antibodies have to cross, and that's why in these species there is usually no prenatal transfer. There's no antibodies that can cross the placental barrier to go inside the newborn. So at birth, these species, they have no antibodies at all. And we have the total opposite in humans and in rodents. If you look here, and you see it's partly the case in dogs and cats, this is what we call an hemochorial placenta, where in fact the blood of the mother is directly in contact with the placenta of the offspring. So there is a prenatal transfer of antibodies in these species. And dogs and cats, they have an endoteliochorial placenta, which is something very specific. And in this case, we have a partial prenatal transfer. We know that in puppies and kittens at birth, 5 to 10% of the antibodies they have come from the transfer of antibodies from the mother during the pregnancy. So it's not a lot, 5 to 10%, but there are still some antibodies that can cross the species barrier. And that will explain you why if we, piglets or calves, etc., they are much more susceptible to the lack of colostrum that we're going to touch on than puppies and kittens. Because if these animals are not able to receive the colostrum to receive antibodies, during the pregnancy from their mother, they need to receive it somehow, and the answer in these cases is the colostrum. The colostrum is the first milk produced by the mother, which is enriched in antibodies. And by suckling this colostrum, those newborns will absorb these antibodies and then will somehow develop their immune system at birth. They will receive their immune system from this milk, from this first milk of the mother. And this is extremely interesting because, again, in all these species here, if the main part of their immunity comes from the colostrum. If they don't get the colostrum, they have close to zero immunity at birth. And when it comes to colostrum, it's kind of interesting. When we speak about colostrum, recently I had a discussion with this breeder. She said, "Oh, colostrum, but how do you make the difference between milk and colostrum?" You mean milk, because the queen is lactating, so she's producing milk. It's the same thing. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. From a practical standpoint, it's very hard to make the difference between a colostrum production and a milk production. Again, we're going to discuss that further during the presentation. We have tools today that can help us make the difference in a clinic or in an experimental setting. But when you're sitting next to your queen, when she's giving birth, to make the difference between colostrum and milk is not something easy. And the only thing we can rely on today is definitely the color of the mammary gland secretion at this time. Because when it comes to colostrum, the colostrum, as you can see here on your computer, the color of the colostrum is kind of yellowish. And the more yellow it is, the more concentrated in antibodies it is. But that's the main element that can help you tell for sure that the queen is producing colostrum, because the milk, on the contrary, is totally white. And that's one of the, it's merely from a practical standpoint, it's mainly the only element we have when you're sitting just next to your queen to make the difference between a colostrum secretion or a milk secretion. And that's extremely important, because if you see this yellowish color, you know that colostrum is secreted. If it's totally white, very hard to say if it's colostrum or if it is already milk. But we're going to touch on that and about the quality, etc., of the colostrum. Because I told you that the colostrum is an antibody-rich secretion. It contains, the fluid that contains the most antibodies in this species. And after birth, here you have a very interesting graph that shows you the concentration of different forms of immunoglobulin. Immunoglobulin are antibodies. And as you can see, well, the most important immunoglobulins in the colostrum are what we call the IgG, the immunoglobulin Gs. And this concentration is very high in the colostrum of the queen. And if we look at that, if we look here, you see that the concentration of these antibodies drops quickly. As you can see, this colostrum the first milk of the queen contains a high level of antibodies only during the first 24 hours. And it's always interesting to focus on 24 hours after what? It's mainly 24 hours after beginning of lactation. So maybe today it's less frequent in queens, but this can happen sometimes. You have queens producing milk well before parturition, well before they're going to give birth to the kittens. So it could already be colostrum. It's very hard to say that at the time of birth, if they started producing milk well before, it's very hard to say for sure if at birth it will be colostrum. So you see that the colostral phase, the production of colostrum, only lasts during the first 24 hours after onset of lactation, in fact. And another interesting thing is that, as I told you, that the colostrum is the substance which is the more concentrated in antibodies. It has 2 times more immunoglobulins than the adult serum. And it's interesting because this is very different from what we will find in dogs. Very often, I'm sure you know that, very often people tend to think that cats are small dogs. But in terms of colostrum, it's something totally different. In dogs, the concentration, especially the IgG concentration, is sometimes 120 times more elevated in the colostrum than in the serum. While in cats, it's only 2 times more elevated than in the adult serum. And we will see that this plays a huge role in terms of choosing alternatives in case we don't have access to colostrum. And the other key thing here, when I was a vet student, I was told that colostrum was produced during 48 to 72 hours after beginning of lactation. In some very old textbooks of veterinary medicine, we can find sometimes that colostrum is produced during the first 10 days after parturition or after beginning of lactation. It's important for you to keep in mind that this antibody-rich secretion, this colostrum secretion, is produced only during the first 24 hours after the onset of lactation. And that's a key element. And because after 24 hours, there are still some antibodies, but they are not enough to help the puppy or to help the kitten build its first immune system, because it will not be sufficient to protect the kitten properly. So as you can see, the colostral phase of lactation is kind of short because it's only 24 hours after beginning of lactation. But moreover, the colostrum needs to be produced by the mother, but the kittens need to absorb this colostrum because they will suckle the first milk of their mother, and these antibodies will go in the intestine and cross, in fact, the intestinal barrier, so they could spread all across the body of the animal, and they could help build this first passive immune system. However, this permeability, this ability of these antibodies to cross the intestinal barrier is again very short in time, because this intestinal absorption usually only lasts during the first 12 hours after birth. And there's this very interesting publication from 1996 where they showed that after 16 hours after the birth of the kittens, the colostrum cannot be absorbed anymore. So your kittens, well, first thing, your queen produces colostrum only during the first 24 hours after beginning of lactation. But moreover, the kittens can only absorb this colostrum during the first 12 to 16 hours after birth. So that's a very short window of time during which those kittens need to be able to get the colostrum and to suckle the colostrum from their mother. If they don't have access to the colostrum during this very short window, unfortunately, they might not be able to have this immune system. So there is a very, very strong, very short absorption phase in the newborn kittens. And I think today what is extremely important for breeders is to help those kittens build a strong immune system at birth. And in order to optimize that, it's for sure first a matter of timing. As soon as the kittens are born, you need to help them suckle the colostrum. You need to help them drink this colostrum from their mother as soon as they're born, so that they can build this immune response or this immunity. You also, it's also a matter of quantity. For sure, the more colostrum those kittens receive, the more protected they might be. And this is something we see from time to time. Some kittens tend to drink more colostrum than the others, so some of them might be more protected than the other. So they need to receive the adequate amount of colostrum in order to build a proper immunity. One thing I also need to mention, colostrum, today we mainly focus on the immunological role of colostrum because it plays a huge role in terms of immunity in the newborn kitten. It has many other roles as well. One of the roles colostrum has, it also acts as an energetic booster after birth. The colostrum, for instance, is more energetic than normal milk. So kittens need to receive this energetic booster just after birth in order to not suffer, because there are very few reserves after birth. So if they don't receive this energetic booster, it's more difficult. It can sometimes predispose them to develop hypoglycemia, which is one of the most common causes of neonatal mortality just after birth in those newborn kittens. So moreover, it's a matter of timing, but it's also a matter of quantity. And more than that, more than quantity, it's also a matter of quality, because the better quality the colostrum is, the better the survival rate of these kittens might be. And the quality thing is always something very difficult to assess, and now we're going to touch on that. Because how to optimize the quality of this colostrum? Maybe you're familiar with the bovine and the equine species. And in the bovine and the equine species, they use things like that, like you can see on the slide now. They use refractometers in order to evaluate the quality of this colostrum. So for instance, you have a mare that just gave birth to a foal, and they can take the colostrum, they can look at it with this refractometer, and depending on what they will see, they will be able to tell if it's a good quality colostrum, it's a very good quality colostrum, or if it's a poor quality colostrum. Unfortunately, and then based on this result, they will be able to decide if they can give the colostrum to the foal or if they need to go to another alternative, because they are lucky in the equine species. They have access to colostrum banks that they can use for their newborns. However, in the cat, it's a little bit more complicated because we don't have those tests. We don't have access to these tests that we could use to determine if the colostrum is very good, fair, poor. We don't have that. We have tests that exist. They do exist, and they help us to measure the quantity of immunoglobulins inside the colostrum secretion. However, these tests today, they are not easy to use in routine practice. So that's why most of your veterinarians don't have access to them. They are mainly used in research facilities that work on the colostrum. And today, to tell the truth again, we have no real way to assess the quality of the colostrum. The only thing you guys can do to to look at the quality, to look at the colostrum is to check the color. And if just after birth you have this yellowish secretion, you can think that, okay, it's colostrum and the quality might be okay, but that's the best shot we can give. If it's totally white, you can think that, oh, maybe it's already milk and the quality is not good. So the color is really the only thing we have in order to evaluate the quality of the colostrum in the queen, which is really subjective, but again, that's the best we have at the moment. And keep in mind that colostrum contains antibodies. So these antibodies come from the mother. They come from and it means that the mother produces those antibodies. So these antibodies come from the disease the mother was vaccinated for, or the diseases the mother met during her life. Which means that one of the key things in order to improve the colostrum quality is to properly vaccinate your breeding cats. So I know there are lots of debates today on vaccination, etc., and we are not going to start to discuss this today because I'm definitely not the best person to speak on vaccines in felines. But what I just wanted you to keep in mind is that in many species, I'm going to give you an example. In France, I was working with lots of catteries, etc. And I remember one of them, one day, they told us, we're going to stop vaccinating because we don't believe in vaccines and we don't want to vaccinate. They stopped vaccinating. And when they stopped vaccinating, few months after, they started to see cases of penlook appearing in their cattery because unfortunately, the parvovirus that causes panleukopenia is quite common in the environment, and it's quite common in cats. So when they stopped vaccinating, especially the kittens, they started to develop clinical signs of penlook. So they didn't stop vaccinating for long, and they started again vaccination. But unfortunately, it was a little bit too late, and it took them a long time to fix the situation. So keep in mind that before we had vaccines, many of these infectious diseases that we still see today had a huge impact on the breeding colonies, especially in catteries. So the best way to optimize the quality of the colostrum today is to have a queen that is able that had already built a strong immune response. And if you vaccinate them properly today, that's the best way, especially in a cattery, which is highly predisposed, and I'm sure you know that cat breeders are very sensitive to that, highly predisposed to infectious diseases. That's the best way you have, one, to protect your animal, but second, to help your breeding animals produce enough antibodies so that we have a very good quality colostrum in terms of antibody concentration. And the other interesting thing that we can focus on is about the feeding management. So why is that important? So you can see here you have two small pictures, one picture of a cat, one picture of a dog, and if I put these pictures here, it's for a simple reason. Very often I hear that, okay, we should feed again, we think that cats are small dogs. So we think that we should feed pregnant queens the way we should feed pregnant dogs. Maybe you know that in dogs, usually during pregnancy, we know that 70%, we know that 70% the puppies will take 70% of their final weight during the last 20 days of pregnancy. So that's why usually we increase the energetic content of the diet during these last 20 days. If we start to do it earlier, unfortunately, the bitch, she will have an excess of energy from the food, and she will store this energy, turn it into fat, which can lead to these problems during parturition. But in queens, it's totally different. In queens, we will start to increase the energetic level since the beginning of gestation, and that's for a simple reason. In dogs, as you can see here, during lactation, the energy they need to sustain the lactation, which is the most demanding stage energy-wise in the animal, the energy comes only from food. While in the queen, the energy comes from the body fat deposit and the food. And this body fat deposit is obtained by by starting to increase the energetic content of the diet since the beginning of gestation. Because the queen, with the food alone, she will never be able to properly sustain the lactation. So she needs those energetic reserves before giving birth so that she is able to properly sustain the lactation afterwards. And that's, again, the way you feed them during pregnancy clearly influences the quality of the milk and therefore the quality of the colostrum. So it's a tiny detail that on which you guys can play in order to optimize the quality of the colostrum. If you feed your animals well during pregnancy, first you will increase the neonatal survival rate because the kittens will have more reserves at birth, and moreover because the milk and the colostrum will be of better quality. So think about that. These are things very simple that you guys can do in your cattery to improve the quality of the colostrum. And let's go back to our initial situation, because this is great. I showed you that, okay, we have few things we can do to try to optimize the colostrum quality. However, what should we do when the mom has no milk? And this is something these are cases that are submitted to us nearly on a weekly basis. As you know, when we breed cats, we need to be prepared. Maybe this is not a situation you experienced already, but it's important to know what you guys can do if this ever happens. Because keep in mind that 2 queens out of 3 will give birth usually in the middle of the night. And if you don't know what to do at this time, it might be very difficult to help those kittens, to help them get what they need, and maybe this will lead to problems afterwards. So let's go back to this case. Okay, mom has no milk. There's the good news. There are alternatives today. You can use, and there are things you can do to help those newborn kittens that didn't receive the colostrum. The first thing we can think of is definitely the serum. I told you about the fact that, if you remember a few slides ago, we spoke about the concentration of, we spoke about the difference in terms of antibody concentration between the colostrum and the serum. Told you that in dogs, the colostrum is contains sometimes 120 times more immunoglobulin G than the serum. But in cats, good news, it's only a twofold difference, which means that one possibility you have, because the serum contains antibodies. This is the part of the blood that contains the antibodies. The serum could be an alternative in case your kittens didn't receive the colostrum. If you want to provide them with this immunity, you could collect the serum on the adults, inject them subcutaneously to the kittens, or even give them orally in order to compensate for this lack of colostrum ingestion. And this is something that has been studied in the queen. And here I'm going to show you a little graph. You can see in blue here, these kittens didn't receive colostrum after birth. And you see that their levels of immunoglobulin in their blood is very, very low and will only start to rise after 4 to 6 weeks. While in pink, you see the kittens with the colostrum. After birth, they receive the colostrum and boom, it spikes. While here, you have the same thing, kittens that receive they injected, in fact, serum subcutaneously or intraperitoneally just after birth. In fact, they injected it after birth, just after birth, 12 hours after birth, and 24 hours after birth. They injected 5 milliliters of serum in those kittens, and they could they didn't reach the amount of antibodies those kittens received from drinking the colostrum, but they were able to obtain quite a good concentration in immunoglobulins just by injecting serum in these newborn kittens. So that could definitely be an option. Especially, I told you they injected 5 milliliters at birth, 5 milliliters at 12 hours, 5 milliliters at 24 hours. Following what I just told you before, the 5 milliliters at 24 hours might not be required. So 10 milliliters of colostrum, of serum injected could help those kittens receive this immunity. And this is something they do from time to time in shelter environments. However, from a practical point of view, this is not always feasible because in order to obtain 5 milliliters of serum, usually you need approximately 10 milliliters of blood. So if you have a large litter of kitten, you see that you require a lot of blood from your adult cats. So maybe it's feasible in certain cases, but that's not always very practical. And again, those kittens need to receive the serum very early after birth. So that's a possibility you have, and you need to work with your veterinarians if this is something you're interested in. But this is not an easy solution. It's not easy to collect the blood because you need to centrifugate the blood, collect the serum, and then inject the serum to the kittens. So could be done in certain situations, and I know many shelters are using it from time to time, but in kittens, in breeding catteries, it's not always easy to do it. If you decide to go for this situation, keep in mind that if you do that, you need to be sure that the donors, the individuals where you collect the blood from, they do not suffer from any disease, especially feline leukemia and FIV, which are those two pathogens we don't want to have in our breeding catteries. And there could be another alternative. I'm sure you're familiar on the market. We sometimes find some colostrum derivatives. And here you have one. It's an equine colostrum that is available on the market. And some people ask me, okay, but what happens if we gave them this kind of colostrum, this horse colostrum, to those newborn kittens? Will it make a difference? Will it be something that can help compensate for the lack of colostrum? And that could indeed be an interesting alternative. So look here, for instance, here in blue you have the kittens that receive the colostrum. So you see that after birth they receive the colostrum and they build quite a strong immune response, immune system. And then you see here different situations, especially those two, the blue one and the purple one here, where they receive equine colostrum subcutaneously. So they were, by administering this equine colostrum, they were able somehow to increase the level of antibodies in these newborn kittens because those antibodies were able to cross the intestinal barrier in those newborn kittens. So it could be an interesting solution because somehow you increase the number of immunoglobulins in the blood of your newborn kittens. However, we realize one thing. It's important to keep in mind that those colostrum that we can buy on the market, they mainly come from bovine or equine, and herpes virus, for instance, a feline herpes virus is totally different from an equine or bovine herpes virus. So the antibodies you find in the bovine or equine colostrum are not adapted for the pathogens you will find in cats. So it can provide a kind of local immunity, especially at the level of the digestive tract, which can be something interesting because we know that most of the pathogens enter the kittens, etc., enter the body of the kittens through the digestive tract. But however, even if this will virtually increase the number of antibodies in the blood of these newborn kittens, this will not provide them with protection, even because they have antibodies that are not able to do what we call opsonization, which is in fact neutralization and destruction of those pathogens, because they don't recognize those pathogens because they are antibodies from bovine equines, which are not made to fight the pathogens in the feline species. So could have been a good alternative, but unfortunately not good enough for, it will not permit to protect those kittens. Another alternative you can use, and which is quite interesting, quite interesting if feasible, I must say, is to collect the colostrum. Let's say you have a queen that's about to give birth, and you notice some days before that she starts to produce milk. And you see that this milk has this yellowish color of the colostrum. So what you could try to do is to collect this milk and to put this milk, to store this milk at the freezer and keep it for the kittens, so that just after birth you could feed them and you could give them this colostrum or this first secretion that might contain the antibodies. In dogs, we do this very easily, and that's not a big deal. In cats, I must admit, I always wonder if this is something easy to do. I did it once on a queen. It works, but it really depends on your animals. And I think you know your animals better than anybody. So if you think this is something that can be done, you can try to collect the colostrum from them, put them in vials, freeze them at -20°C, and then after birth you can thaw it. You need to use a water bath because antibodies are proteins. So if you microwave them, unfortunately, it will destroy all those proteins. But this is an option we have today. Eventually, I think for sure it will work more easily in a Maine Coon than in a Singapura, for instance. But why not? That's potentially an alternative you guys could use if you can collect the milk from those newborn, from those queens. Sometimes people ask me, oh, but if we collect the milk from the queens, will this not lead to parturition? Because it leads to oxytocin secretion. And that's true, that leads to oxytocin secretion. But keep in mind that for oxytocin to be active at the level of the uterus, we need the uterus to have oxytocin receptors. And those oxytocin receptors, they will only appear at the time of parturition because there is an hormonal modification that leads to the apparition of those oxytocin receptors. So if parturition is not ongoing, even if you collect the milk, this will not lead to parturition earlier in the queen. So that could be an alternative, but again, it's not always easy to do. If you do it, usually we recommend to give to the kittens 1 to 5 ml for 100 grams of kitten. That's the amount they should receive. And if you remember the study I showed you before with the use of serum, they gave 5 milliliters of serum to the kittens. So since the serum is 2 times less concentrated, we see that we can decrease a little bit the amount of colostrum they need after birth. But that's definitely an option you have. The other option is to use a dedicated milk replacer. And why am I telling you that? For a simple reason. The difference between the serum and the colostrum is only a 2 times difference. So for sure, we know kittens need to receive the colostrum in order to be in optimal conditions, in order to optimize their chances of survival. But to tell the truth, we have many kittens. We know today that if the kittens are kept in good conditions, if you pay good attention to the sanitation of your cattery, if you take care of them in a good way, even if they didn't receive the colostrum, we can save those kittens. We don't have huge neonatal mortality rates if they don't receive the colostrum. So you never know, unfortunately, if you will have to face a case where the mom gives birth and she has no milk and she has no colostrum. So I think when you breed cats, it's always important to keep on hand a feline milk replacer. Today we know we have dedicated solution, we have dedicated product to we have dedicated milk replacers for the feline species. Maybe you heard that in the past many people, and still today many people use goat milk. So maybe goat milk was a good alternative 10 to 15 years ago. But today we know that the composition of the milk of the goat is totally different from what we will find in kittens. I truly think that in case, let's say, you ever face this kind of situation, we know that those kittens after birth, they need an energetic booster. So you need to have something you can feed them, and a dedicated milk replacer will do the trick. And we can save kittens just by bottle feeding them or even tube feeding them. I think all breeders should need how to tube feed some kittens because sometimes it can definitely help saving them. And if you are interested in that, don't hesitate to go to our blog because this is something we shared recently on our blog. a video of how to tube feed a puppy or a kitten. So that's something I truly think all breeders should know, because we can definitely save some kittens sometimes just by tube feeding them when they are so weak, and then they catch up, and when they feel stronger, they will be able to suckle again their mother, etc. And I just wanted to show you this study that is a very recent study from 2014 that focused on neonatal mortality in kittens, in fact. And it says what I just told you before. We know that kittens deprived of colostrum, we can save them. For sure, it's better if they receive the colostrum. But if they didn't receive it, we can save them if we do the proper things and if we take good attention to the care we're going to give them and to the sanitation. And there's something else we need to focus on, and you can see it on this phrase and this sentence I just highlighted. It's a blood group, because colostrum can provide immunity, but sometimes it can also lead to a disease in kittens, which is neonatal erythrolysis. And that's what we're going to touch on in this last part. Because you know that in kittens, in cats in general, we have 3 different blood groups. We have the A group, the AB group, the B group. And one interesting thing, we know that the individuals from the B group, they have lots of antibodies which are directed against the red cells of the individuals from the A group. So because of the genetic determinism of the blood group, it's eventually possible sometime to have a B mother that gives birth to kittens from the A group, and you understand what happens then. Because the problem is always when you have a female from the B group that is bred to a male from the A group. In this case, you might have kittens from the A group. And I'm not going to discuss the genetic determinism, but if you're interested in, again, this is something you can find on our website. But the mother from the B group, in fact, transfer lots of antibodies against those red cells, against the red cells of the kitten. So this is the neonatal erythrolysis phenomenon. The kitten gets intoxicated by the milk of its own mother, because the colostrum of its own mother contains lots of antibodies directed against its very own red cells. And then this is when you will see this neonatal erythrolysis. So we have plenty of different clinical expression, because again, it depends on the dose of the toxic. The more colostrum the kitten ingests during the phase where he is able to absorb the colostrum, the more severe the clinical signs will be. We can have hyperacute death, kittens that are doing well, and when you come back 2-3 hours after, they're dead. You can have kittens that start to fail to thrive, lose weight, and die in a couple of days. You can have sometimes kittens showing necrosis of the tail, because this is where all the antibodies accumulate 15 days after birth, just because they ingested some antibodies against their red cells, but not enough to kill them, but enough to cause this tail necrosis 15 days after birth. So this is definitely something you guys need to focus on in breeding catteries, because this is not uncommon, and it really depends on the breed you have. Because depending on the breed, you understood that the problem comes from happens when you have a mother from the B group, and the frequency of the B group varies depending on the breed you have. For instance, if you have Siamese, Burmese, Russian Blue, Oxycat, it's very rare to find individuals from the B group in these breeds. Not impossible, because everything is. I always go by the fact that everything is possible in biology, but it's very rare. But if you go in Maine Coons and Norwegian, you see that sometimes up to 10% of the individuals can be from the B group. In Persians, Scottish Fold, Burmans, sometimes up to 25% of these individuals can be from the B group, which means 1 individual out of 4. And if you breed British Shorthair, Cornix, and Devon Rex, sometimes up to 60% of these individuals are from the B group, which means that in those breeds, the risk of dealing with neonatal erythrolysis is much more important. And in fact, we know today that in certain breeds, you see in Devon Rex, British Shorthair, Cornish Rex, even in Sphinx, we sometimes have 25% of the litters that are at risk, which means 1 litter out of 4 again. So this is definitely something that can happen, and that is certainly one of a common cause of neonatal mortality, especially just after birth, during those first 2 to 3 days after birth. So what you guys can do today, fortunately there are solutions. The genetic determinism of the blood groups is something we know well today. And I took this picture from a laboratory that provides breeders with genetic tests in Europe, and the same thing exists in North America. We have genetic tests that can help you define the blood group of your cats before breeding them. So then you can adapt your breeding strategy. You can decide if you need to breed, if you have a B female, maybe you will not breed this B female with an A male because you have the risk of ending up with the problem of neonatal erythrolysis. And I know some breeders, I met a breeder a few years ago that told me that she removed all the individuals from the B group from her cattery, so it was easier for her to manage this problem because she didn't have to focus on the blood group of the kittens. You also have rapid tests that are available. So I showed you this one because this is one which is available in North America, but there are different type of tests out there. And you have those tests that you can use on the kittens just after birth in order to check their blood group. Why am I telling you that? Because you guys are the breeders. You guys decide which tomcat and which queen you should breed together in order to reach your genetic selection program goals. And people like me, we're just here to help you do this, to help you do this properly. But I'm not able to tell you, oh, you should breed this cat and this queen with this queen, etc. Because you know your individuals better, you know your genetic selection program better than anybody. And if you sometimes maybe this is something you would like to do, you will want to breed a female from the B group with a male from the A group because you think this breeding is interesting for your genetic selection program. And in this case, if you want to do that, you know that unfortunately some of these kittens might be from the A group, and if you want to test them, you can do it just after birth. You can use this rapid test. Sometimes you can collect a drop of blood from the umbilical cord just after birth, so that you will know, and you will know just after birth if those kittens can suckle the colostrum of their mother. Because the strategy here, if you decide to go for this breeding, is to prevent those kittens from drinking the colostrum of their mother during the first 16 to 24 hours after birth, because we know that this is during this period where they can absorb the colostrum. And where they can unfortunately develop neonatal erythrolysis because of this. So just by removing the kittens from the mother during this period of time, will prevent the development of the disease. I must admit I tend to be very cautious, and I usually recommend to breeders to start feeding them only 24 hours, to start to put the kittens with the mother only 24 hours after birth if this situation ever happens. But I met some breeders who are doing it 16 hours after. And if we look at the genetic, at the data we have in the literature, normally 16 hours after birth, the colostrum doesn't go through the intestinal barrier, so it should be fine. But I tend to be cautious, and I prefer to wait 24 hours just to be sure, just because, again, we can see strange things sometimes in biology. But the good thing is that you have the alternative. And during this time where the kittens don't have access to the milk secretion of the mother, they can be bottle fed with an adapted and dedicated milk replacement. So this is what I wanted to tell you concerning colostrum in kittens. And I think something important to keep in mind is that the colostrum intake for sure provides the kittens with this early immune protection. And this early immune protection, as you can see, depending on the disease, will last quite a long time. For Penluke, it will last until up to 14 weeks after birth. FELV, 6 to 8 weeks, feline herpes virus, 6 to 8 weeks. So if they take this colostrum, they will be protected for a certain amount of time. But then what happens is that progressively we will see a decrease in the amount of the antibodies those kittens got from the mother, because the kittens get bigger and it's more diluted because some of these antibodies are consumed by the pathogens the kitten meets in its environment. And progressively we'll move from this immunity from the colostrum to the kitten's own immunity. And this transition is not always smooth, because this is then when, unfortunately, sometimes this will lead to what we call the critical period. This period where, unfortunately, maybe there are not enough antibodies to protect the kitten, not enough antibodies from the colostrum to still protect the kitten, but the kitten is still not able to mount a proper immune response. And this is why sometimes when you vaccinate those kittens at around weaning especially, you see the diseases, you see the kittens develop the diseases you just vaccinated them for. Doesn't mean the vaccine didn't work. It just means that unfortunately we vaccinated them during this critical period. And that's also a fantastic topic, but that's definitely another story that we won't touch on tonight. So what I want first to thank you for your attention. As I said, it's a very interesting topic, and I think there are plenty of things that you guys can do to decrease the risk related to absence of colostrum, of lack of colostrum in the feline species. What I also wanted to tell you is that today the feline breeding community is not a big community. And one of the things we do today, we are more and more present on social medias, and we really try to interact with you guys as much as possible, to share with you interesting information, etc. It's a small community, and the more people we have who are part of this community, the more we can help this community move forward. So don't hesitate to join us, to follow us on those social medias, etc., and be part of the conversation. Because if we want to bring the feline world forward, we all need to have a constructive, and I insist on the thing that it needs to be a constructive discussion. We might not be agree on everything, and that's normal, that's life. But if we can have a good discussion, we can learn from each other, and we can definitely help this breeding world move forward. So again, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So what we do is now we'll move to the chat, and I see there are some questions. Thank you very much, and thank you for being there tonight. Bye-bye.